Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our very first Sony Australia Alpha live stream for 2020. We're going to be having a casual chat with some amazing photographers from across Australia and New Zealand. And I'll be your host for this evening. My name's Sean Ellwood. I am I'm the Demand Creation Manager at Sony Australia, which is a title that means nothing. But I'm a big old camera nerd, and I'll be joining some of the best from around the entire of Oceania, including Mark Gaylor, Sony
Hi,
Alpha
hello.
Ambassador. Hello.
How are you
So good to
doing?
see you, sir. I'm
Good.
brilliant. It's good to see people's faces and break a little bit of the isolation. So
That's great. It's good to get together in times like this.
yeah, exactly. I'm also joined from all the way over on the West Coast, where it is 6 p.m. Andrew J Clarke, Sony Alpha Advocate.
Hi, Sean. Hi, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Thank you for being here.
Welcome, Andrew.
And from across the ditch over in NZ, we have Meghan Maloney. Hello.
Hey, everybody.
Also a Sony Alpha Advocate.
So nice
this is
to
gonna
be here with you all.
Yes, it's so good to see everybody's faces. So we have just the four of us for this evening. We're all just going to be sort of having a chat through a bit of the news of the day. I guess for the people tuning in, if you've tuned in the hope of a new product announcement or anything like that, it's not what this is. So just so you know, straight off the bat, if that's what you're hoping for, you can turn in early. It's not going to be that. But
I might clock off then, Sean, if there's no product.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I expected this. Yes. So, really, we're going to have a bit of a chat about what we've been doing during isolation, some of the news of the day. I think the guys have brought some stuff for show and tell. Is that right, guys?
Yes, we've got some things to show.
Lovely. And we'll take a few questions here and there as well. So that will be our show. So maybe just because I'm not sure that everyone in the audience is going to have seen everyone here, why don't we kind of go around and do intros? Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I've been a photographer for 40 years. It's the only thing I've ever done. I think a lot of people probably know me through YouTube. As well as being an ambassador for 12 years, I've been an educator for more than 25 years. And so I put the two together and I put out learning resources for the Alpha community. And you can find that on YouTube, and you can also find it on my website, markgaylor.com. So that's basically me. I come from an editorial background, so I shoot everything except what I eat. And I don't put the cameras underwater. And that's about it. I do everything else.
Man of all trades.
Yeah.
Meghan.
Yeah, hey, so I'm Meghan and I'm from New Zealand, and I'm a landscape and travel photographer. I've been doing photography for probably about 5 years, but I definitely got more serious once I picked up a full frame camera and realised its capabilities. I am super passionate about New Zealand and think it's the best and most beautiful country in the world, and I'd love everybody to come and explore it. And particularly, it's a bit difficult at the moment, but I'm hoping to encourage Kiwis to get out and explore more of their backyard once we can travel again. So, yeah, just happy to be here.
Great. And Andrew, last lucky last.
I'm a landscape photographer predominantly, but been doing a fair amount of commercial work for the past 3 or 4 years in a sort of semi-professional capacity. Before that, a hobbyist photographer for 10 or 15 years. Signed on with Sony at the start of 2019 as a digital imaging advocate, and have been running events and workshops and presentations and that kind of thing over in Perth.
Yeah, great. So how's everyone's lockdown been so far? Everyone staying sane?
About the same. No changes.
It was a very, very smooth transition for me as well. I was like, I can't go outside? Damn. But Meghan, I can imagine you. I know you're definitely an outdoors girl.
Yeah, it has been different, but I can't believe it's been 3 weeks already, to be honest. It's actually gone so fast. And yeah, I mean, I don't know whether we'll come out of lockdown next week. We're sort of waiting with bated breath to hear. But Yeah, it's amazing what you can find to projects to do and things to do indoors. The only thing I will say is I went to put some camera gear away tonight, opened my camera bag, and there were spider webs in it. So what does that tell you?
Ooh, yeah.
It's been too long. Yeah.
The restrictions are pretty heavy in New Zealand at the moment, aren't they?
Yeah, well, we can't really. We can go out and do walking and a bike ride around the neighbourhood, and that's pretty much it. So you're not meant to drive anywhere apart from the supermarket. So, yeah, so no photography apart from the driveway. So I might get to show you a shot of my photo from the driveway, my one shot from isolation.
How's the isolation been observed in Melbourne, Mark?
Yeah, I just moved just before lockdown, so it's been interesting. I've had things to do around the house, put pictures back on the wall and stuff, but I've also had some long-term projects. I do bury myself in the studio periodically from time to time and kick out loads of learning resources. So I'm in the middle of that now. I've got 3 ebooks on the go and masterclass series of short for me. That's usually 20-minute movies on YouTube.
You're a relentlessly productive man. It's true.
Yeah, I sometimes tell people how many paper books I wrote before they became unpopular, and people think that it makes me sound like a Mills and Boon author because I kicked out 30 paper books. It's crazy.
Andrew, you've been keeping yourself sane enough?
Yeah, enough. Similar level of sanity over here.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, been plowing through some of the sort of old catalog, the back catalogs of works that have just been sitting on my hard drive unedited. Working on a few video resources as well for the sort of Sony Alpha Perth Facebook group. Not quite at the level of Mark Gaylor churning out. What were you saying you were working on? 9 movies or something?
I just released 9
Lightroom
CC movies for mobile devices, and but ebooks are my big one now.
Yeah.
So yeah, just plowing through some of the old catalog, working on some online resources, and that's about it from the photography point of view.
Yeah, brilliant. We've been doing a little bit of work on the Sony side as well. I guess those of you who are local to Australia and New Zealand, you might have seen our Sony Scene website has been sort of on hiatus during COVID. We're kind of looking into some ways that we can keep that ticking over, which has been keeping us busy, and also looking at the Alpha Awards, which are still going on full force. We're looking to announce our judges soon, and that'll still be going on. Probably we're going to push back announcements from late May, maybe just into June, but otherwise we're still planning to do a big hoo-ha, and all the categories and prizes are still going ahead. So anyone who's been sitting on some entries, get them in, because it's going to be a good one.
Might end up getting more entries if people can't be out shooting photos. They may as well be editing their existing ones.
Do you just want to remind people what the award was last year, Sean?
The
prize, the grand prize. Yeah.
Well, thank you for the reminder, Mark. A grand prize of $10,000 worth of Sony Alpha gear. You can pretty much pick from anything in the catalog, and in most cases, that grand prize goes to the winner of one of the categories, who's going to get another $2,000 worth of gear on top of that. Although actually last year was a bit of an upset, and it went to someone who took out a finalist, but not the grand prize. So it's always still up in the air. But yeah, we're looking into what we can do in terms of live streaming, that sort of thing. I think it's going to be a fun time. All right. Well, look, let's take a quick little segue then, and maybe talk a little bit about some of the news of the week, if everyone's up for a bit of that. I guess maybe the most visually interesting thing that's happened this week is the Sony World Photography Awards, which the sort of open competition winners were announced just this past week. Have you guys all had a bit of a chance to take a look through the gallery?
Yeah.
There's some that image you just opened up with was crazy. That's
It's amazing, isn't it?
it reminded me of a Led Zeppelin cover where you got this
Mm.
this absence of anything. Yeah,
Yeah, it just looks dropped in, doesn't it?
yeah,
And
it's great.
I think the thing I love about it is that so much of the foreground is just, it's blown out. Like it's,
Yeah.
I think if you were looking at this from a purely technical point of view, you'd say like, oh, well, all your highlights are gone, so you've ruined the exposure. But it just works for that sort of visual confusion.
Yeah, I think the photographer's definitely gone for that really high contrast look, and it really sells the kind of surreal feeling you get from that triangle shape in the black as well.
Yeah. That shape has the capability of flipping as well, so you can see that as a rather than as like a pyramid shape, you can see it almost like a black doorway to another reality. But that's maybe I've been drinking too much scotch.
No,
No such thing, Mark.
Any other favorites for you guys that really jumped out at you from these?
I must say, in the landscape category, there were some absolutely amazing shots. But the what was he? Was it Craig McGowan, the Australian guy, the eventual winner?
Yeah.
That is just a stunning photograph.
Yeah,
Brilliant, isn't it?
The contrast that you get with the iceberg standing off against the pretty colourful background, combined with the symmetry, it's just gorgeous.
And just so sort of geometric, and the color, it's kind of got everything. It's been a landslide for the Aussies in this. They've really taken. Aussies took top spot in, what was it, landscape, culture, I think was Australia, with that amazing Iggy Pop image.
Yeah, that's so cool.
And what else was it? The nature and wildlife was top spot, was also an Australian.
yeah, that one went viral, didn't it? During the bushfires.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, very topical.
Yeah. I was expecting to see a lot of bushfire photography in the sort of awards season coming up through the AIPP, but a lot of the state awards and the national awards have been postponed, so we might not see that for another year.
Yeah, it's kind of their chance to get out is kind of past, I guess. A couple of the other ones that I sort of picked out, I guess. This still life one really reminded me of the category winner for Seascape for Alpha Awards in 2019. Just sort of that, I guess, having that scented plastic bag, and definitely like a very strong environmental message.
Yeah, the visual narrative there is kind of the same as the one from the Sony Alpha Awards last year.
Absolutely.
I think there's a good point to make here is if you are entering awards, technically excellent shots don't cut it for some judges. Some judges are wanting to be surprised, and I think that has a certain element. I'm not saying you should always do that, but certainly after you've seen the 58th sunset, just to flip into something and go, ooh, that's different. That's definitely going to win you some brownie points with at least one of the judges.
Yeah, a good sunset by itself will not cut it in virtually any competition. And in fact, if you scroll through like the landscape, for instance, or even the nature, world, and wildlife categories, you don't really see a good sunset in any of them.
Yeah, I was judging, Andrew, at the one of the AIPP awards a few years back now, and a black and white print came up of some rolling sand dunes, and it was beautifully printed. I said that could pass as an Ansel Adams print. And so I gave it the gold, a high award, and the two judges next to me gave it a silver. Yeah. And I quizzed them after the microphones had been switched off. I said, why only a silver? And I said, if that was an Ansel Adams print, would you have given it a silver? And he said, yes.
Wow. Yeah. I remember hearing a story from Tony Hewitt talking about, and I hope I get this right, but he was talking about a print he submitted some time ago. He submitted it for both the Australian Print Awards and the New Zealand Print Awards. And I think at the Australian, it got somewhere in the 70s. That wasn't even awarded. And at the New Zealand, it got a gold. It was the exact same print submitted to both competitions. There's huge subjectivity, and the judges can be looking for very different things depending on who you get on the day.
Yeah.
With the national awards, some people will actually work out who are the judges before they make their final selections. Because if they're academics coming from universities who are teaching photography, they know those people are definitely looking for a political landscape or something that is a little bit shocking. Certainly not something that is aesthetically pretty. We'll cut it with those type of judges.
Yeah. One of my favorite bloggers, Michael Johnston, he writes a online column called The Online Photographer, but he did a piece just recently talking about the weird mix of sort of like high and low culture stuff you get in photography, where some people are really interested in just something that's just pretty and like looks great, but they don't really need that much more. It's just like, if it looks good and I want to hang it on my wall, then we're done, we got a great shot. But then you do have a lot of judges who are looking for like a message, something that makes you stop and think.
There's just a question come in there. It's from Robert Detman. He's saying, "What is this competition?" It's we'll just repeat that. It's the Sony Alpha Awards. It's
this is the Sony World Photography Awards.
Sony World Photography Awards, and that is you can make submissions to that one without having shot it on a Sony camera. It's basically an open for everything type. And if you ever get shortlisted in these awards, I had one of my students get shortlisted in the student category one year, and both he and his lecturer, me, were flown over to the West End of London, and we were treated like royalty. They're shown in a palace on the Thames, and they give you a dinner for 500 people on Park Lane, the expensive bit on the Monopoly board. And it was a life-changing experience for my student, because as part of his prize of just being shortlisted, he got 3 folio reviews, and one of them was from the director of the Tate Modern.
Wow!
And she liked his folio so much that she said, "What are you doing after this?" And he said, "Oh, I'm going back to Australia." And she said, "Why?" He said, "What do you mean? Why? That's where I live." He said, "But I'd give you work on the strength of this folio." So he stayed. He stayed in London.
That's cool.
Yeah. Well, this is going to sound like horrific name dropping, but we had a meeting with the guys who run the Sony World Photography Awards, and they were saying, like, for so many of the photographers who enter and win, that's right. It is a life-changing experience. It can absolutely propel you from someone who's very much a enthusiastic amateur to being in a position to just be a professional photographer full time, no question, on a global level.
Yeah, wow.
It's no joke. Any others that? Oh, I was gonna point this one out for you, Mark. I know it's an iconic subject for you. I had to check the nameplate. It's from Belgium, so it can't be you, I'm afraid. But
yeah, that's right. Look, I test cameras and lenses on running dogs, especially dogs running towards the camera. So many people review lenses by people walking. And really, if you're going to test one of the linear motors on a Sony Alpha lens, you're going to have something coming at quite close range to the camera. And I live just one block back from the beach, so there's and people don't get upset with you taking photographs of their dogs. And I think and anybody can go to their local dog park and get some great action photography. And most of the Alpha cameras released in the last 4 years are more than capable of doing this type of photography.
What do you think about the execution on this one?
Oh yeah, look, it's absolutely fabulous. I use water as the energy. This one looks like it's sand, deep sand. It's got that same sort of thing. Generally, what I've done with these usually you can befriend owners on the beach, and if you get them throwing balls, and the dogs are running away from you. But if you befriend the owner and you get the owner standing over your shoulder and the dogs are coming back to the owner, or you get them to throw the ball at you and the dogs are running towards you, and this type of photography, so long as you get the right settings in the camera, it's you don't need any panning skills. You just point the camera and shoot. And that's it.
How have you found the animal IAF for, like, for instance, dogs running at you?
Animal IAF currently isn't able to be activated at the same time as AF tracking. So the animal IAF is more to do with portraits of dogs. And if you just left it, the AF system normally, you'd get very sharp images of dogs' noses. And what you need the lens and camera to do is push back to the eye. So it's fabulous for that. But otherwise, you just do the AF tracking or the lock-on AF, and that handles that type of work.
Any others that grabbed somebody's eye that we could sort of pull up and have a bit of a chat about?
I quite liked the one in the travel category. I think it's the one that's it's kind of got a bit of pink colour at the top and the white mountain sort of light reflecting a little vehicle at the bottom. I thought that was pretty cool.
You've caught me in the wrong category.
Sorry.
Wow. As well, anyone who's I know, it's just the lack of professionalism here is really shocking. I will say, anyone in the chat who's got questions or comments, feel free to chime in. We're not obviously we've got a bit of a structure we're trying to stick to here, but very open to chime-ins from the audience as well. Oh, there we go. Yet another category where the Aussies have crushed it.
Totally dominated.
Go the Aussies.
Yeah, up the Aussies. Sorry, you were saying, Megan?
Yeah, I said totally dominated by the Aussies. It's the bottom right, towards the bottom right there. Yeah, that one. Just one up.
Oh, one up.
Next one up.
Yeah,
that one. Just a tiny little vehicle on the bottom, and just a little bit of light hitting the mountains.
I wonder what the category rules were for travel photography, because this looks very
more
processed,
like
and sometimes that's not permitted in travel type categories.
Yeah,
but it's a stunning photograph.
Sean, if you go back to the grid view there, just for a minute. Okay, there's an image above that one, shot presumably in Vietnam, and there's actually been a blog post against these type of setup images. People saying it's not travel photography because this is quite clearly orchestrated for the lens, and this is getting more and more popular, especially in Southeast Asia, where people carrying things, with water buffalo, and they're quite clearly, set up travel photography. And there's a sort of a movement against this heavily stylized setup, staged travel photography.
It does look great, but then you sort of look at it and you're like, wait, why are these flowers in the...
Yes.
Like,
What
are you doing with these flowers exactly?
Yeah. But, for a judge who hasn't been aware of that type of photography, it looks great, and this may not be set up, but it's more than likely to have been set up. So ever so occasionally you see one of these creep through in an open category and get shortlisted.
I think that sparks a larger debate around, that kind of journalistic standard in photography competitions, and where the line between, I guess, just recording an image of a scene and being faithful to the scene and the reality of the situation, as opposed to creating a piece of art. And everyone seems to have their own take and their own interpretation on where you should be when you're entering a competition.
It's definitely one that we struggle with in the Alpha Awards as well. We sort of we have limited resources. There's only so much time, and ultimately, like, there's an element of timeliness as well. Like, you close entries, the clock's kind of ticking. Like, you sort of want to get to, all right, well, let's talk about who won, before too long. So, it's tough, because if you really want to drill down and be sure, then you have to devote some resources to it, and especially for the Sony World Photography Awards, where they must just have so many entries. It'd be really tough.
So there's an interesting winner from this category, the Australian guy, because it doesn't jump out as visually striking as some of the other entries. I'm not sure if you have the caption or something that went along with it.
I don't think there's much more included here. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I'd imagine there must be a sort of a little bit more story, although definitely, you know, seeing the sort of atmospheric effect on the left from just all the dust shaking off the train is striking.
Yeah.
Well, maybe let's move on a little. I think the next sort of little piece of news of the day, a little bit more on the gear side, is we just launched the version 2 firmware for the A9 Mark II. I haven't yet had a chance to try it out, although I do know a few of the guys in the office have. But yeah, I guess just to quickly read through it, the high-frequency flicker function allows you to reduce the impact of flickering of artificial light sources like digital signage, electronic signage boards, LED lights. Everything I've heard about this is that it's really effective, and it's definitely been feedback that we've received from, you know, pros shooting with the A9 Mark II was, you know, if I'm trying to shoot for a client and they want to see that advertising that they paid for on the digital signage at this field, you know, having that ability to control the flicker is actually really valuable. So
have you tested that on?
It's actually quite easy to use. It's surprisingly easy. You have to use it in shutter priority. Typically, I'm an aperture priority with ISO auto minimum shutter speed. But if you go into shutter priority and just enable it, you basically just cycle the shutter speed until the flickers disappear. It's that easy. And you might end up with 1/802th of a second. Right? Yeah, okay. Basically, they're micro adjustments of shutter speeds until the flicker just disappears in the viewfinder, and then you shoot.
You have to do it manually, like you have to find that 802nd.
No, you just wind the shutter speed until the flicker goes away. That's it. And it's more to do with the stadium LED lights, not rather than the fluorescent. The fluorescent lights are sort of a low frequency flicker, which is covered by the current A7R4 and A7R3 cameras. So the A9 now has the low flicker frequency and the high flicker frequency, and you can use both at the same time, apparently. So,
yeah. So then we've also got the improving the face eye priority and AF function. So this we were talking about this a little bit earlier before the stream, and we think you know, this is really more about not changing the way that the eye autofocus function works, but the way the default focus function works. So normally, when you half press the shutter, whatever focus area you've got, if there's a face or an eye in there, the camera is going to focus on that for preference. But with this, you can quickly toggle between doing that or having the sort of more old school system where it would just track the closest thing in that area. Which seems, you know, definitely like something that gives you a bit more control. I don't know, is that something you guys think you would use for your photography?
I'm definitely using IAF on a custom button in together with the IAF on, so I'm definitely used to using that. I've done a movie about, you know, why it's useful to have IAF on a button, even though it's on all of the time. I'll be playing with this a little bit more, and possibly another IAF movie will come out the other side, especially if it's rolled out over other cameras. So, I think the biggest... I was going to say the biggest new feature here, though, that most people are talking about is the ability to close the shutter when changing lenses.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, so that's a little further down. Yeah, it's an interesting one because it's obviously a piece of feedback that we've had, you know, for a long time. Giving people, I think everyone feels the anxiety of getting dust on your sensor and having to clean it and having to worry about a blower and all this sort of thing. Is this something that you guys have? Sounds like something you guys have sort of been really looking forward to.
Well, I remember when I saw the sort of news announcement from one of our competitors about their mirrorless range having that feature. My initial thought was, oh yeah, that's a great function. I'm sure Sony will bring it in. It seems like a really good idea. But thinking about it a bit more, I'm not convinced it's something that's going to make a huge difference because speaking as a landscape photographer, often changing lenses out in the field, my concern is not necessarily dust going straight onto the sensor, but just getting into the body itself. Because after that, you've got the shutter open at all times with a mirrorless camera. If there's dust in your body, it's going to be moving around as you turn your camera upside down and put it in your bag and that kind of thing anyway. So I'm interested to try it out, and I will try it out, but I think the bigger issue is just taking care to not getting anything into the camera body, full stop.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sony are just a little bit concerned. You can see in the help guide online, they're just a little bit concerned how users will treat this. So like Paul Marison's asking, will it be rolled out to other cameras? I think the A92 is going to be a guinea pig. And if obviously loads of cameras go back for repairs because of damaged shutters, then Sony will rethink this. One of the weird warning things was just leaving the camera off with the lens cap off. There is a very slight risk that the sun's rays will basically set fire to the shutter mechanism, which is like, wow. Okay, right. So they're obviously a little bit concerned. So I think they'll run it as a test bed. And I think I will use this feature, especially on dusty days, but I don't think I'll leave it as my default setting. I'll just, if I'm forced to change a lens and I can't go indoors or turn my back to the wind, maybe I'll just activate this feature. So I'll put it in my menu and then just run with it when I have to.
Yeah, it's I think there's definitely like a feeling of that's nice. Like it feels tidy and kind of sorted when it's closed away like that. But yeah, I mean, as I think you guys probably know, the sensor's actually a lot tougher than the shutter. So yeah, you probably get a bit less dust, but your chances of doing something really expensive to your camera definitely go up with the shutter closed. So yeah, we shall see. Certainly, yeah, it'll be. I'm sure there'd be demand for a closed shutter on other models. Okay, all right, great. Well, look, I think most of the rest of it mostly has to do with FTP transfer and that sort of stuff, which is very useful for the people who care about it, but not everyone's cup of tea. So maybe let's move on. I thought we might also just have a quick chat about DP Review did a great little article where they kind of picked out their favorite lenses for APS-C and full frame, and I thought it might be fun to get your guys' takes on their picks and see what you like. So sort of start maybe with the APS-C models. We had a bit of a chat already off stream about the 18-135 as their favorite kit lens replacement. Mark, I think you were saying, it was Andrew, you were saying you're a big fan of that one, right?
I think we were both saying it.
Yeah.
It's typically the lens which I'll recommend first for the hobbyists who want to upgrade from the basic kit lens, which comes with the APS-C range. Yeah, little bit sharper and a little bit more versatile is kind of where we landed on that.
It's actually very, very sharp, especially in the center. Look, if you're a landscape photographer like Andrew, you're going to be a little bit critical of the corner performance of the wider angles. And so you might switch over to maybe a 10-18. But it is super, super sharp. I was surprised how sharp it was when I was reviewing this lens. It was so sharp, I asked Sony to leave me with the lens. And it's got a very useful zoom range. It's got the equivalent, a full frame equivalent of 28 to 202, I think. And so that's, it really is an excellent travel lens for an APS-C user who wants to travel with a messenger bag and maybe just one other lens, maybe a prime or the 10-18. And so I think that makes a great kit lens, really.
And then for the best prime, they've picked out the Sigma 30mm, for which I may one day forgive them. What do you guys think about primes for APS-C? You got a favorite?
Can I just kick in again on this one because I'm quite passionate about this topic, Sean? I actually use 3 full frame primes. These Sigma primes, the 1.4, are very, very popular with the community. They do love that ability to get the very shallow depth of field. And I respect Sony Sigma for having made these, but my absolute favorite prime on the APS-C bodies is the 85 1.8. It's one of the more affordable Sony lenses. It's pin sharp, wide open, and the ability, if you do like bokeh and you're leaning towards these Sigma lenses because of the bokeh, then you're going to get it in spades by going a little bit longer on the focal length. You're going to get almost like my favorite prime for the full frame cameras is the 135 1.8. And the 85mm prime behaves like a 135 2.8 equivalent. And it's such a fabulous lens, fast focusing, light, pin sharp, affordable. So and they actually have listed it as one of their alternatives below the Sigma. So they have recognized that it is. And I did a video earlier on, which is that one mount principle, because I know Tony Northrup in America said it was usually a bad idea to put a full frame lens on an APS-C camera. So I created 3 albums of images captured with a 35 1.8, the full frame, the 55, the Zeiss, and the 85. And some of those are so sharp on the APS-C cameras, they make your eyes bleed. So I think Tony jumped the gun there. He just hadn't tested enough lenses to realize what he was saying was absolutely complete rubbish.
And I think as the resolving power of even the mid-level lenses is improving their performance on the APS-C cameras will do better as well. If you run the same test with lenses from 5-10 years ago, you might see a noticeable difference on the APS-C bodies. But the new lenses are just so good. And I agree with your comments about the 85 1.8, an amazingly sharp lens for what is not a G or GM Sony lens.
Yeah. It's interesting they've recommended here the 12 to 24 for APS-C as well. I guess obviously it does offer that ultra wide, and because you do have the flexibility to move across different mounts with the Sony kit, that makes life a bit easier. Mark, you got a chance to play with the 70 to 350 APS-C lens, is that right?
Yeah, look,
telephone.
I put my neck on the line there because I know that it makes some people angry putting an APS-C lens on a full frame camera. And I actually wanted to take the 70 to 350 out to the US. I spent 5 weeks in the USA doing predominantly landscape, but you never know what's going to happen when you're out on location. And it did happen. I was in Death Valley and a dingo just appeared. And even the guide said he'd been coming to Death Valley for more than a decade and never seen a dingo in the middle of the day. And of course, I'm using the A7R4, and I put the 70 to 3. If I had the 70 to 350, I actually use the 70 to 200 f4 because it's a very small full frame lens. But I would have, if I'd had it, put the 70 to 350 on because it's got the equivalent reach of 525. And it's a very sharp APS-C lens. It's fast focusing. It's quite affordable for a Sony lens. And on the A7R4, you're getting 26 megapixels in APS-C crop. Which is fine for a dingo. Not a dingo, a coyote. It's a coyote.
That lens didn't make the DP review list, did it? The 70 to 350.
It didn't. I wonder if there's just an element of timeliness there, or maybe it was just it's not a cheap lens, so maybe there was a cost element.
Is it ballpark similar to the 70 to 200 f4 though?
It's cheaper.
It's cheaper.
Cheaper, smaller, lighter.
Seemed like an oversight in the article.
It feels that way, but maybe they wanted to keep to lenses that they'd use themselves, and they just
that's fair enough. That's fair enough.
Yeah,
I think it was an excellent release into the APS-C lineup because we had the 55 210, which is very small. It's actually surprisingly sharp. It's very cheap, but you're not going to capture my running dogs on the beach with it. Its AF performance isn't going to keep up with any of the A6000 series cameras.
All right, I'm gonna put you guys on the spot here and ask you for your favorite standard zoom. This is where it's gonna get controversial. What do you guys? Is everyone just using a 24 to 70 GM? I should say.
Yep. But it's not the one I shoot with all the time. I shoot with my 1635 the most.
Yeah. Look, in in a way of I like the 2470 GM, but I did chop it out for the 24105 because I predominantly shoot with primes, and I'm always trying to get under 7 kilos. You know, when you're trying to get rid of a quarter of a kilo here, quarter of a kilo there, I sacrifice the extra weight. And if I want the very shallow depth of field, then I just put on an 85 or a 135 prime or a 55 prime.
For the keen landscape shooters here, the ultra wides, Megan, I assume you're just going to tell me that the 16-35 is the
best thing
is the way
since
to go.
sliced bread. Yeah. I mean, I would love to try the 12-24, but because I use filters so much, it's just kind of can't really go there with it. So yeah, I think I'll just stick with my 16-35.
Well, you can, Megan, but the filter, the Nissi filter kit that Nissi gave me to so I could review the 12-24, it's nearly 1.5 kilos.
Oh my
Really?
gosh.
Is it a bit cumbersome to try and get filters on the front of that in that sort of
no. I made a movie. It's actually quite easy. It's a very well made product, the Nissi filter kit. And look, if you adjusted landscapes and you're only going out with the 12-24 plus your filter kit and your tripod, then 1.5 kilos extra is not the end of the world. But you know, I've got the telephoto zooms, I've got the primes, I've got, you know, it's just another 1.5 kilos that I just wouldn't normally run with. I'd normally run just with maybe an ND filter or two. A screw in.
Well, guys, thank you for talking kit with me for a little while. I think maybe let's move over to a little bit of show and tell. Show us, I don't know, I'm excited to see what you guys have brought to show us this evening. Anyone want to put their hand up to go first? Don't all jump in at once, guys.
Yeah.
you pick, Sean.
Just delegate.
All right. Look, Andrew, I've been looking at your little picture there, so I'm gonna put you on the spot here. Tell us a little bit about what you've been doing.
All right, so this is actually quite a recent photograph. Over in WA, the restrictions aren't quite as heavy as what Megan was saying over in New Zealand. So heading out to, as long as you're social isolating, heading out to take a photo, as far as I know, is still okay for the moment. So I've been going for walks along the river and taking my camera with me, get a bit of exercise and a bit of scratch that photography itch. This is a location in South Perth facing sort of northwest-ish. It's actually quite an undershot location, this specific spot. The South Perth foreshore is very, very common for landscape photography, but this is just a bit out of the way. And you need to, go down a path and near a car park. And honestly, if you turned around from this photo, it's a very sort of suburban, a little bit ugly location. And you have to punch in just a little bit. I think I shot this maybe 40 mils or so, just to remove some of the distractions to the side, which would ground the photo in reality of the scene, which isn't nearly as pretty as my cropped in version. But this is actually a location which I had shot once before, maybe 18 months ago. And I had a grey overcast day with virtually no colour in the sky. Actually, I've got that photo here as well. And so for this version, I zoomed in a little bit further, I think 70 mils for this one, and was really playing with the colours of the lights in the buildings, and I put in a cyclist into the middle there to give it a little bit more. But as I took this shot, I was like, I need to come back. I need to come back on a better night, and it took me 18 months and a couple of failed attempts. But I eventually got this one only a few days ago. And the irony of the scene was that there was more people out exercising along the river than I'd ever seen before, because the restrictions on going outside, but for doing exercise and that kind of thing, I think it caused a lot more people to be doing exercise around sunset. So yeah, amazing colors in the sky, and it's actually South Perth shooting north is often a better sunrise location. So it's rare that you get color extending this far, sort of to the north and to the east above the city. So very, very happy to get the timing right on this one and get a shot I've been wanting to get for a couple of years.
You're in Lightroom here. Do you mind just punching in on this? I'd just love to see the detail on that.
So hopefully it'll load okay over the stream. But yeah, this was shot on the Mark IV, the R Mark IV. I would have been on the 24-70 GM at about 40 mils, f11, ISO 100, shutter speed was about a minute for this one.
Yeah, right.
So that you'll see a little bit of blurring.
Detail in the foliage, even so.
Yeah. So the sections which weren't moving, like the trunk of this tree and the street lamp, they're nice and sharp. This is at 100%, by the way. Background, you can see all the lettering on the buildings, which is hundreds and hundreds of meters past that location, past this mid-ground location here. There's a fair distance, which can be a challenge sometimes without focus stacking. So pretty happy with that one, but you can also see it was a minute-long exposure, so the trees are certainly moving in the wind and that kind of thing. Yeah, but loving the Mark IV, that 60 megapixel resolution.
Yeah, how's your computer holding up?
Not too bad. I edit. I've got a decent computer at home, and I edit using Smart Previews, which is one of Mark's favorites. I know. So not too bad.
Brilliant. All right. Well, shall we skip on over to Meghan? So I'll just swap you in there. Oh.
Yeah, so this is my one and only photo I've taken in the last 4 weeks because we've been pretty restricted on what we can and can't do. So I can't even really go out in the car anywhere to even down to the local lake. I mean, I could, but I don't really want to get asked by the police what I'm doing. So this was one evening. I mean, I have been keeping an eye on pretty much every single sunset, and we don't get a lot of electrical storms on the Waikato, but on this particular evening, the clouds were brewing. And so, yeah, I just I went outside. I was standing in the driveway and got the long lens out. We live in a relatively new subdivision, so we've got some quite, I would say, probably quite attractive lampposts compared to your standard lampposts that you'd get, in other kind of older subdivisions. And yeah, that sort of worked with the layers of the clouds and the, with the sort of, I guess, the depth of the cloud and the height of the cloud and the different colours running through it. And yeah, it just kind of seemed a bit of at the time that we're in, a bit of a beacon of hope, I guess, having that little lamppost shining with the storm behind it. So yeah.
Yeah, the colour in those clouds is yummy.
I tried very unsuccessfully to capture some lightning. I had just the most awful luck, and I had it on fast shutter mode and everything, and I think I managed to catch about 1 out of about 100 I tried that night. But yeah, I was actually just enjoying seeing it too, because as I said, we don't get very many electrical storms here, so the kids were out in the driveway enjoying it as well. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
Meghan, Matthew in the chat has asked how much editing would go into an image like this.
That not a lot for that one, to be fair, because the colours were just how they were in the sky. Yeah, I think I maybe spent about a minute editing that one. A little bit of straightening, because I don't know why, but the lampposts in our street, they didn't build them very straight. If you look down our street, they are all like this as you look down the street. And the guys who put them in clearly had a bit to drink that day. So
it's probably very authentic.
Probably. Yeah.
I saw another question about my image before. I'll just answer it over the airwaves. I was asked how many photos went into this shot. I'm not sure if they're saying how many did I take in the series or if this is a composite, but this particular shot isn't a composite. This was just as is. And but I would have taken maybe, I reckon, 30 or 40 photos over the course of the sunset, because the light was changing and I was experimenting with some shorter shutter speeds to get some of the ducks and the little ripples in the lake and a little bit of action in the midground with all the cyclists and that kind of thing. But yeah, just a single image.
Well, Megan, did you have any others to share with us, or
Well,
shall I move on?
haven't been taking any others, but I did have a I'll just quickly squiz back over into here. One other thing that I have done during isolation was I actually celebrated my birthday during isolation.
Oh.
Yeah, and I actually
Happy
shared my
birthday.
birthday. Yeah, I shared my birthday with my husband, which is even weirder. So yeah, it's like 20 something years of having to wake up and say happy birthday to someone else when it's your birthday. But yeah, I was like, well, I can't go out for dinner and I can't, go out and take any photos, but I had I thought that it might be really nice to give back, I guess, at a time like this. So I did a bit of a shout out earlier in the week and said, hey, if you would like to win this canvas, anyone around the world can enter. And I had quite an overwhelming response, actually, I guess, because I said I'll send it anywhere. Haven't quite figured out the post yet because we don't actually have a postal system at the moment. But once it's back up and running, and I think in the end I did like a joint Facebook Instagram live giveaway on the morning of my birthday, and some gentleman in Germany won it. So as soon as the post is back up and running, it'll be winging its way around the world. But yeah, it felt really nice because I know so many people are struggling in different ways to give back. So yeah.
Was this image in the Alpha Awards a couple of years ago?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
I thought I recognised it.
Yeah. Did we send you the hard copy, the canvas?
Oh yes, I have. It's like 2.25 meters, and it's in my entranceway at home. It's humongous.
We
I love
so
it.
many people who got them. They got them home and just went like, "What? What do I do with this?"
I must admit though, mine did sit in the garage for 8 months because we were having an argument about where it was going to go, and it took a long time. And then one day we just like, stuff it, we're going to get it up, and we were halfway through putting it up, and then we realised that actually we could. It was not a 2-person job, and we were both standing there holding it, going, "What do we do now?" The kids were out, so luckily a friend just happened to turn up at the right time to be the third person we needed to get it up on the wall. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely glad I wasn't hanging those. All right, Mr. Gaylor, are you ready to share?
Yeah, no, I'm sharing. Can you see what I'm sharing?
I see it. And so does everyone.
Okay, cool. So this is my most recent efforts coming out online. I've not been taking any photographs, but I've been busy in my studio building learning resources. And one of the things that's been happening, perhaps it's changing quite rapidly now, is the mobile version of Lightroom. It's called CC rather than Classic. It's becoming very usable on tablets, and so for people who are looking to travel really light, it's a great way of maybe shaving off a kilo and traveling and editing while you're out there on location. So I just wanted to make people aware of that series, which has just gone up. And one of the things I want to share is maybe a project that people can do at home. I was looking at a link, I think it was Alpha Universe in the UK, and they had a portrait photographer giving a couple of tips. And his very last tip, which was only about 90 seconds, right at the end of his talk, was to invite people to take a family member, put them in the shade, looking out towards the light source. And as a portrait photographer, I immediately related to this technique because it's one of my favorite techniques. I often refer to it as the open doorway shot. It's basically using the same sort of soft lighting as window light. And all three images you're looking at here now are using that same soft light, not sunlight, but just looking out. Generally, when you've got an open doorway, you've got a very dark background because the light doesn't travel very quickly over the threshold. So you get these beautifully gorgeous, softly lit portraits. And one of the other things that is if you've got a family member who's just a little bit nervous of being photographed, is getting them to interact with the doorway itself is a way of getting them to relax. So I just thought I'd quickly show 3 of my portraits. This one was taken in Victoria. This one was taken in Malaysia at Ipoh. This guy makes tea, and I've invited him to come out from where he's making tea to the open doorway. And it's just a way of relaxing the body against the door frame. And the final one was this guy. He's a sculptor in Montana, and he was very nervous about being photographed. But getting him out to the doorway and getting him just to lean on the doorway just helped him to relax his body, and the portrait session went really quite well after that period of time. Okay, so I think we're probably running a little bit short on time. I'll probably share things maybe another time. I did have a couple of more photographs I wanted to show, but maybe
we're not. I don't think we're not really running to a strict schedule. If you got something you would like to share, but
I'll go back and share again. You just told me to.
Go on, be a devil.
Okay. So let's go back.
Can never get enough Mark Gaylor content.
I know. I was just really settling in there.
Yeah. So if people know my own style of photography, they'll also know that. Well, we were in the middle of a Sony scene roadshow when it all sort of fell apart. The dates fell apart, and we went into self-isolation. This was taken from my 1.5 hour presentation, which was me talking about my work and talking about how I'm driven much more by narrative than I am about getting likes on Instagram or Facebook. And this was one of a sequence of images that I photographed in Hiroshima. And I was talking about the difficulty of, because most of my stories or narrative stories are based around human characters. There might be landscapes, there might be activity shots, but there's always the humans that really bring the stories to life. And the problem with Hiroshima was challenging because when the bomb went off, obviously most people died. So like my choice was, do I create a Hiroshima narrative without any people? But over 3 days, I did start collecting a few portraits or street photographs. And this was the one that I decided became sort of the key image in the story. This is an obelisk in a back street. It's almost like a Melbourne laneway. And it's 600 meters below where the bomb went off. And they slightly missed their target when they dropped the bomb, and it went off over Hiroshima Hospital. And the current site now is a medical clinic. And so when this guy walks into the shot with a white medical coat, and it was quite moving. I mean, Hiroshima, I found, was intensely moving place to take photographs. And the light that is falling, sometimes I use apps to work out where the sun will be, so I know where to be in a city at what time of day. But sometimes you can be led astray because sometimes light happens very strangely. Like the sun is actually in front of me. It's just after sunrise, but it's reflecting off a window that's behind me. So the shadow is coming off reflected sunlight onto the wall. So, yeah. And a lot of people say, they're often indecisive about when to convert a series of images from color to black and white. And sometimes a series of images shouts out to me that they need to be black and white because color becomes a distraction and light is the key element in the series of images. And this was certainly the case for Hiroshima. The shadows. One of the things that I noted reading some of the signposts, that the only evidence that some people died was a shadow of where they'd been standing. And so this image contains an awful lot of symbolism. And that's very important when, say, a picture editor will only take 4 or 5 images from a story. And you've got to sort of pack in as much information into a single image as possible. Okay, I think I'll stop sharing this. Food for thought.
Definitely. Well, maybe we'll sort of start moving toward an end here. I guess, do you guys have any projects you've got for yourselves in lockdown for the next week or so? It doesn't have to be photography.
Oh, it's always about photography, isn't it?
Yes.
One way or another.
A little bit.
Yeah. I'm using the time to, I've been wanting to do a bit of an online course for a while and just never had the time to sit down and write it. And so I'm just sitting down to write that at the moment and having a bit of fun doing that. And I just kind of want to do it as a bit of a live thing because at the moment everybody seems to be loving the live Zoom chats, the live streams. So I'm thinking about running that as sort of 5 1-hour live sessions over 5 weeks, covering, camera gear settings, composition, editing, the creative process. So yeah, that's what I'm doing in my spare time, amongst sort of wrangling kids who are trying to do online learning and learning all their technology at the same time. So that's my world.
Mr. Gaylor, I assume you'll be madly authoring.
Yeah, I've just recently updated the A92 book in line with the new firmware update. I've just added another 40, 50 pages to my A7R4 book because that had a firmware update as well. These things are never locked down. They basically are getting bigger. They're pretty much all over 400 pages now. And I'm currently working on the Alpha 6600 to add some more gaps, what I perceive were gaps in that book. So that one will nudge 400 pages. That should be released tomorrow. And I've also got some my own workflow moves over time as well. I always considered zebras and peaking were for videographers, and I've just started using zebras. And I need to let people know how stills RAW shooters can use zebras. Basically, I never really want to see the zebras. So when I actually see the zebras, there's a telltale sign that I'm overcooking the highlights. So you really have to create a custom setting at maybe 107, 109 plus as the lower limit. Just to give you an idea. I first started getting more into zebras with birds in flight. If you've got a bird in flight that's passing with the sky in the background and then trees in the background, the exposure is going up and down massively quickly, and you haven't got time to compensate. And so moving into manual exposure mode and setting an exposure off the ambient lighting conditions is very useful. So I've got many ideas for new tutorial movies, and I'll keep releasing those, keep adding that information to the ebooks.
Would you use the zebras in conjunction with a histogram?
I always tell people that the histogram is like a rear vision mirror in the car for me. I'm always sort of aware of it. My only sad thing about the histogram, it's not quite big enough, and there's not a clear evidence that it's hit the right-hand wall. And the zebras can be controlled a little bit more than just glancing at the histogram and just saying, oh, it's just hit the right-hand wall and climbing that right-hand side. And it's always the blown highlights that sinks. One of the great things, Andrew, about the A7R4 was when I was in the canyons in Utah and Arizona, I started bracketing like 5 and 9 image brackets. And the A7R4 blew me away because I underexposed by 3 or 4 stops to get the highlights in. And then I recovered the shadows, and they were of phenomenal quality. Yeah, it's almost like it's the camera that's made bracketing superfluous.
Yeah, that's kind of been my experience as well. Like I used to bracket a fair amount. These days, I just don't need to do it nearly as much as I used to before.
Yeah.
So again, Luke Sharkey pop up in the chat.
Yeah.
And again, the zebras would come into useful there. You just make sure the zebras aren't spiking on the highlights. And it doesn't matter how dark the foreground looks. You know, with an A7R4, you can just whack it back open and post.
It up.
Yeah,
for sure.
Andrew, what's your week coming up looking like?
I got a few more little editing projects that I set for myself a few months ago in preparation for some awards that I was going to be entering. So I'll just keep working on some of those. I've been doing a video series for the Sony Alpha Perth Facebook group. So I've got a couple more little videos to put out for that as well. I just put up a review on my website for some filters. A few things chugging along.
Brilliant. We had a little question for Megan actually in the chat just about how the Pukaitan shot of Taranaki was captured. Maybe Megan, tell us a little bit about the process.
Sure thing. Yeah.
I know this is something you actually talked about in your interview with us for our Full Frame High campaign.
So
I know you got a story.
I do indeed. So this image was taken in end of December 2017. So I just popped the settings up because I was trying to remember what they were. I did an overnight hike with a friend the year before, or a couple of friends actually, and we got up to the town, stayed the night, ended up sleeping on the hut wooden floor because we hadn't really planned for the hut to be full. You can't book it, so that was an interesting experience with the wind howling outside, sleeping on a hard wooden floor. You can imagine there was not a lot of sleep had. And then we climbed up behind the hut to the sort of the peak where you can kind of look down on the ton, and there was this massive layer of inversion cloud, which meant that the ton would have been fully in the mist. So we had to just make do with some shots from the top of the hill instead. And so a year later, tried again, did the same thing, walked up in the dark, 2.5 hours up to the hut. This time came prepared with the tent, so we didn't have to worry about sleeping on the hard floor. And yeah, we woke up in the morning to these incredible conditions. And so this was captured just after sunrise. So the sun had risen from the left-hand side there from the east. And it was particularly still. I mean, you can get some really still conditions up there, but it's not that common. Taranaki is out on the west coast there, and it's sort of the first part of New Zealand that kind of catches the wind, and so it's notoriously windy up there. And I think you can see there's obviously a little bit of movement in the scarf of cloud that's sort of sitting at the top there. But yeah, this was actually shot with the 1635 f4 because I didn't have the 2.8 at that point. So yeah, it did a pretty good job. And I mean, it's probably not that common to be shooting at f22 for a landscape shot, but it worked. I won't tell you how many dust spots I had to get rid of out of the shot when I was editing it, though.
F22 will do that.
Yeah,
definitely show
sure.
it up.
Yeah, that served me right, putting it on that setting in the first place.
All right. Well, look, any last minute plugs from you guys? Where stuff that you want to mention so people can check it out this week?
I'll just say
talked about most of it.
If there's anyone in Perth in the chat, feel free to jump into the Facebook group, Sony Alpha Perth. We got a nice little community going there. We got all of our events and photo sharing and running a sort of monthly competition at the moment, just like a casual sort of photo challenge every month in lieu of the Sony scene events. So you can find that by just searching Sony Perth and maybe Sony Alpha Perth in the Facebook chat. Facebook search bar, and that'll get it. Otherwise, if you want to connect with me on social media, just go to my Instagram, which is andrew.j.clarke, and all my links are in my bio there.
Great. And we'll pop some links in the description for this video as well. Megan?
Yeah, well, obviously, as I said, hopefully I'm going to have this online course up and running within a couple of weeks. So that'll be sort of dropping in through my website, which is meganmaloneyphotography.co.nz. I'm just really going to keep it pretty small to 10 people. So I'm hoping if I get a few waitlists, I can do a few rollouts over a few weeks. But yeah, just connect with me on social media. Instagram is just Meghan Maloney Photography. I'm hoping to keep putting out some blogs. I actually just recently, or last week, I wrote an article on lighthouses that actually got shared by Stuff, which is New Zealand's sort of major news website. And had a heap of really good feedback about that, because I think people are just wanting to think of new places that they can go around New Zealand now that they don't really have the option to go overseas. I read somewhere today, I think that they're talking that 1 million Kiwis might be holidaying around our country in the next 6 months. So just keen to keep putting out content that inspires people to come and visit some lesser known places around New Zealand. So yeah, you can come and check out my blog and maybe join the course. So
great. Mark?
Yeah, I don't know whether you can see my shared screen here. It's basically my website. Share that over. It's basically just to remind people that all of the resources on my website are free. So you can head to the downloads at the section there and just download pretty much anything of the ebooks that I'm doing. Movies are better accessed via YouTube. I've put them into collections, so they're specific to full frame or APS-C or whatever, or post-processing. And there's also a blog there, which I try and do at least 4 or 5 blog posts a month. So probably more this month, actually.
Brilliant. Well, I'm just going to quickly shamelessly plug our new campaign that features 2 of our lovely stream guests here as well. So Mark's work and Megan's work both featured there. But yeah, definitely check out some amazing work on the A7R series site, which is a little microsite we've popped up recently. And I also wanted to definitely bang the drum for the Alpha Awards 2020. Entries are open. They're still open for another month and change. So yeah, think about your entries. You can enter any 5 images, and yeah, there's great prizes. It's a good fun competition to be involved in, and I hope we can really get a bigger one this year than ever. And that's open to anyone in Australia and New Zealand. Guys, thank you so much for joining us on stream. I do want to quickly shout out, heads up, Jamie, put your pants on. I'm going to quickly throw you on stream. We've been assisted in chat moderation by our community manager, Mr. Wong. Hello, Jamie. Yes, he's silent but deadly. And thank you very much for your contributions to this event. And thank you to everyone else. Hopefully we'll catch you guys on stream again soon. And we hope to do these regularly going forward. So have a great night, guys.
Great.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, nice to see you all. All right, take care.
Cheerio.
All right, bye.